AAPC conference. Did everyone enjoy their Napa Valley adventures yesterday? Too much? Good. I made some fantastic risotto at the Culinary Institute. Tonight is the big night. Poly Awards, Campaign Excellence Awards, People's Choice Awards. But this morning, we have a very special panel for you. As part of our 50th anniversary celebration, we're fortunate to be joined by the pioneers and founders of our association. We thought we should take advantage of their presence to tap some of their recollections and insights. So, here to moderate that panel are AAPC Vice President Rose Kapelczynski and AAPC Treasurer Becky Donatelli.
Please welcome to the stage AAPC founders and past presidents, Whit Ayers, Wally Clinton, Walt DeVries, Tom Edmonds, Tony Fazio, Wayne Johnson, Stu Spencer, Ray Struther, and Nancy Todd.
Nope. Wherever you want. Wherever you'd like. Oh, yeah.
Yep, we can put Walt right here. Bring him. No, we're gonna put ours there. I mean, we're gonna put Tom there. No. Okay.
Oh, hell yeah.
Are we live? Okay. So thank you, everybody, for getting up so early this morning. I hope you felt a little bit better than I did after an afternoon on the wine train and then an evening in the wine cave. But this is one of the highlights, I think, of our whole week here. These are truly the men and women that made this all happen. And I've asked Stu Spencer if he would kick us off, because as one of the original founders of this organization, please tell us how, why, and why not?
Of APAC.
Exactly.
The true people that were the driving force in this was Joe Neapolitan from Boston, Democrat, Cliff White, Republican from New York. Both great guys, great gentlemen, different skills. I'm probably the only person in this whole weekend that we've been here that has all the scars from Joe Neapolitan. It started in Joe's brain, and he got Cliff, and then they reached out to myself and my partner at the time, Bill Roberts, and to Matt Reese and Joe Sorrell, and all of a sudden, we were having small meetings. And the one I remember the most, which you would have enjoyed the most, was the one when Joe called me. In those days, everything west of the Mississippi River, they didn't think much of in the east. And so they'd call us up and said, come on back to Boston, we'll have a meeting. And so I got a call from Joe one day, Joe Neapolitan. He says, we got to get this thing put together and quit screwing around. And he says, we got to have a meeting. And I says, I'm not coming to Boston. And he says, well, where are you? I said, I'm in the Virgin Islands, and I'm getting ready for the governor's race. And he says, oh, great. We'll see you Friday night in St. Croix. So that was one of the first meetings of this organization. The agenda consisted of Jack Daniels, margaritas, and Bloody Marys to get over it. Yeah. And that was sort of the beginning of the organization, and from there on out, Cliff White and Joe Neapolitan were the driving force. And they were both great politicians, different skills, but great politicians, and I will say great human beings. I mean, there's two parts to the politician if he's a good one, and being a good human being is an important one. You want me to talk about how I got started?
We'll spend a minute doing that, and then we'll.
Well, you got a crowd up here. We could go for 3 hours at this.
2 minutes.
Okay. I got into politics through my avocation became my vocation. I got back in the Navy after World War II, and everybody was running for Congress and state legislators. Every Army guy, soldier was going to save the world a second time. And so when you have friends who are running for office and they call you up and they say, I need your help, and you go help them. And I reached the point where I really enjoyed my avocation more than I did my vocation, which at the time was, I was a football coach and a director of recreation for a small city in Southern California. And one day the city attorney called me in, and you know, they had the small time machine running the town that they all have. And they had a member of the city council they didn't like, and they wanted me to run for the city council. His name was Earl Murphy, another Irishman. I says, Earl, I says, I don't view myself as a candidate type. He said, I can't do that. So he reaches in a drawer and he pulls out a piece of paper and he says, well, Stu, you've broken every city ordinance we've written. He says, I think you ought to give some thought. At that point, I said, I think I'll go into politics. I went back to my office, got the yellow pad out, put the pluses and minuses down, and my final conclusion was, if I can make $1,000 a year more than I'm making here, I'm going. Well, I lucked out. I got a job with the LA County Republican Committee for $1,000 more than I was making. And for your information, I was making $10,000 a year in those days. So that was my start, and it was a great ride.
So we're going to turn this over very quickly to the audience, but can I just ask a question? So who planned to go into politics? Yeah, okay, because there are people today that go to college just so they can be us, and I think that's great that you all planned that. Okay.
I am interested in the questions from the audience on really any topic you want, from business advice, political advice, commentary on today's politics, anything you want to learn from the pioneers of AAPC. So who has a question? Kick us off. Who's awake? Up here.
We can't actually see
Yeah.
Okay,
with the lights, but they're.
okay, I've got a question for Raymond Strother. What is the most, or maybe if you're not too shy, who is the most difficult client you ever worked with?
Is he still alive?
This is being recorded.
It was a she.
Consultant says not to answer.
It was a she, and she was a United States Senator, and it was an everlasting nightmare.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
She would have temper tantrums and throw things at me and use the MF word on me 4 to 5 times an hour
And so finally I told her, I said, you're only allowed to do that 3 times a day. And if you do it more than that, I quit. So on location, on set one day, I quit and went home.
But did you ever go back?
Never.
Any other questions? I saw one over here.
Whoever wants to field it, what professionally was a bad decision, but at the time you thought it was the right one? In other words, you got your way, but after it was over and being executed, it was a bad call, and you made it. Whoever wants to field it.
Who wants to take that one?
I'll take it. Because I've made so many bad decisions. The worst decision that I made was taking a campaign that I really didn't want to do. And I did it because of the money. And that was a huge mistake. Huge mistake. My heart wasn't in it. It was just a bad experience. So be careful about your clients. That's it.
Any other questions? Or do we have another answer from anyone here on the panel to that?
Candidate selection is very important. I think I've probably turned down as many candidates as I've accepted. And there are people I have trouble working for, and I know I will have trouble working for. There's no reason to get involved.
One of the things that I learned early on that unfortunately has continued to prove true in any aspect is that when a campaign starts off with a hassle about money, my fee particularly, it's going to end with a hassle about money, my fee particularly. So I've learned to stay away from it. I mean, it's a big red flag. I was fortunate enough to get into the gaming industry and to legalize those, and the reason that worked out so well for me is that I had gamblers for clients. So what I would do is after the Mississippi legalization in '92, I would just offer them double or nothing. And I didn't lose, and it worked out great. So they had no fee to pay me, and it took that argument off the table. So,
Any other questions in the crowd? Elena.
Hi, good morning. Just curious of 1 or 2 major differences that you find in today's politics versus 20, 30 years ago. Any major differences that you see or progressions that you see?
Who wants to field that? Somebody we haven't heard from. How about Walt?
We're sort of going back to the future. In the 1950s and so on, rallies, door to door, that kind of person-to-person stuff was really important. And it is again today, but now it's digitalized. And television became, well, let me say something about, first of all, about this conference, if I may, which is very energizing to me, and I thought very professionally run. Some of us old geezers were talking the other night about setting up an association of ancient political consultants. But then Dale Emmons came, he said, no, we have to be called the American Association of Aging Consultants. What brought that on was a discussion about the 40 over 40, and this group said, why not 6 over 60? Why not 7 over 70? Why not 8 over 80? And then 9 over 90, which would mean that Stu Spencer and me, at least next year, would be the only 2 there. I didn't answer the question, but I'm a political consultant.
At the risk of being a little more serious, I think if there is a difference, and I don't want this to sound like a put down, but when I got started in this business, people were both the consultants and the candidates were motivated because they were there was a cause or an issue or a reason that they wanted to do something. They looked at their state and they just did not like what was going on, and they wanted to change it. They wanted to fix it. They wanted to move it in another direction. And consultants got involved because they believed in somebody. They thought they could do it. Today, I see candidates saying, well, you know, if I moved to this state or just 6 miles that way, then I have a better chance in that district against somebody. It's all about themselves, and it's all about winning. And I once had a candidate in a congressional debate. I'll name the state, but I won't say the person, in Iowa. And he was running against a woman, and she was at the lectern talking, and he's getting, his turn's going to come after hers. And he leans over to me and he said, am I for or against that? So he's letting me decide whether he says she's right or she's wrong. Well, that's kind of sad. It's really kind of sad.
Yeah, one of the other things I think that's missing in today's campaigns is a field operation. A lot of people want to take the easy way out and just do social media or that kind of stuff, but they choose not to go and do the door-to-door knocking and the field walking around and knocking on doors. So I think that's the difference between now and what we used to do in the old days.
Yeah, I think that the thing that I noticed is the specialization that's occurred. You know, if we were in this room 30 years ago, you know, you'd have general consultants would predominate. And yeah, you'd have people that were the media guy or the pollster or whatever. But the subcategories of specialization that, you know, just even within the digital world, there are so many different occupations that are occupied. And you see this, I think the dangers of that, of course, I mean, while it's led to a lot of growth and a lot of people being very good at very particular things, the danger, of course, is that strategy sometimes gets lost. And it's hard to maintain message discipline over that many platforms and that, you know, that sort of many silos, I think. That's the major difference. You know? Aside from the fact that in the old days, everybody, you know, like everybody on this stage, these are probably some of the most ideologically conservative and liberal people that you're ever going to find in the association, and we're all friends, you know, and you know, I would hope that when what we're going through right now in this country passes, maybe 30 years from now, you'll be able to do the same thing and be friends as well. So.
Go ahead, Whit. No, you go ahead.
Obviously, enormous number of things have changed. The speed with which communication happens, the amount of money spent, the kinds of candidates who are successful. But let me turn the question around the other way and say, what hasn't changed? And for that, I'll borrow an idea from the late, great, brilliant conservative commentator, Charles Krauthammer. In his view, politics is the single most important profession. He left medicine. He was a psychiatrist, and he left medicine to become a political commentator because, as he put it, if you don't get your politics right, nothing else matters. And I've thought about that phrase a lot because I think it's really true. You look around the world at the countries that have gotten their politics wrong and everything else falls apart. So I think we are very much involved in the most important profession that we can possibly choose, and I think we ought to all be grateful that we're a part of that.
I think in the 45 years that I've been doing this, the thing that's changed the most is the amount of money that has found its way onto the political stage. Being from Kentucky, even though we've lost our NCAA bid this year, I use a basketball analogy to describe that. It's the equivalent of having a Final Four game. Instead of having 2 teams on the floor, you got 6, 8, 10 teams all competing at the same time. It makes all of our jobs, who work for candidates, incredibly difficult. It's if not impossible, it's nearly impossible to maneuver yourself through the minefield that lays in front of you. And I don't know where that goes. Being from the left side of the aisle, I'm not encouraged by that development. But I do believe in our system enough and the cause enough that I think we will get it all sorted out, but it's going to take time.
I think you can boil the difference down, in my mind, to the human element. We didn't have hate. We didn't have dislike. We only wanted to wound our opponents. We didn't want to destroy them. And we did a good job at that. But just in the off-election years, I can go back and tell you in the 60s and the 70s, and Rose knows who some of these people are. The guys I had the most fun with were Phil Burton and George Moscone and Moretti and Jesse Unruh, my great hero and enemy. And it's a human element. It's a generational thing that's going on, and it's going on both sides of the aisle today. Hate, dislike, and that permeates the whole system. And as Whit and I were talking yesterday about something, but we're in a mess. Both parties are in a mess. Republican Party started their mess in 2010 with a thing called the Tea Party, and look where we are and what we got today. The Democrats are just starting their Tea Party, and it's interesting, going to be a very interesting party for them in this election.
So let me just add before we go to the next question. I was with somebody yesterday on the wine train, and if I remember this correctly, they said one of the things they like most about coming to AAPC and their vendors is the conviviality, the friendships, the reaching across the aisle, the fact that we all actually appear to really like each other. And we do, and we hammer on our code of ethics and trying to be ethical, but I think it bears out that we all want to get together in Napa and have several days of fun and good conversation. So, Elena.
Hi, just to kind of flip the last question. This is for any of you up there. How have political consultants enabled some of the bad behavior that we see in candidates today? What responsibility do we have as an industry have in making sure that our candidates don't go down a path that we will all regret later?
In my experience, when the political consultants were ideologically motivated, it was a cleaner fight because it was principle-based and you had a class of principles. And I think when you had consultants who manipulate symbols for a living, you know, one of the people that's been indicted and so forth in this whole Mueller investigation was a guy that you know, manipulated the symbols on my side of the aisle for a living, but didn't believe in any of them. And you know, you wonder how you get to a place when a political party allows that, and we did. You know, you're going to pay the consequences, and it's going to happen on both sides. I'm not scared, you know, because I think the media sometimes portrays that these ideologues and so that's not really the problem. People who believe in principles, people who fight for things, it actually has a cleansing effect on the system, and it keeps it honest. And I think the cynicism that has crept in, which I don't think used to be as rewarded as it has been in recent years, I think is a large part of the problem. Now, I do have to have one comment, and that is that Doc Schweitzer has been walking around. He found my badge, impersonating me for the last couple of. Is Doc here this morning? He's not in the room? Oh, so we can say, we can say whatever we want. No, I didn't get his tag, but I kept getting these, you know, like the last one I got was a picture of Doc, you know, standing, well, I could only see from here up, but he was, you know, nude, with the saying, "You're having a great time in Napa," you know, with my name tag on, you know. I try to watch out for Doc, I really do. You know, and just last night, you know, I try to give him good advice. He loves the hotel. It's beautiful. He was coming out of the bathroom out in the lobby, and I told him, I said, you know, Doc, no matter how good the hand soap smells, you really shouldn't come out of the bathroom sniffing your fingers. So.
On that note, go ahead.
Yeah, hang on.
All right.
I wanted to.
No, you can't have it.
Yeah, hello. I wanted to say something to Becky's comment about being a past president. And as soon as you become a president of this association, it rotates back and forth between Democrats and Republicans. As soon as you become a president of the association, you become bipartisan. You have 12 Democrats and 12 Republicans on your board, and there's no more you're a Democrat or you're a Republican. You have to work with folks, and you got some of the smartest consultants in the business. I mean, when I was doing it, I mean, these people were running some of the biggest campaigns in the country. And you just, you ought to have been on some of our board meetings. I mean, they were just incredible. So you have to become bipartisan and work with those folks. So being a past president, it teaches you how to work in those environments. And that's what was very special about AAPC.
In 1967, when Napolitan and Cliff White and myself met to talk about setting up this association, we didn't know what to call it. We thought, would it be an association of campaign consultants, PR people, and so on. At that time, nobody knew what a political consultant was. Today, if you did an open-ended question of the American voter, what do you think of political consultants? And who are they? What do you suspect the answer might be? Manafort? Stone? And that crowd? I mean, the perception then in the late 1960s, we don't know who you are. And of course, we didn't really know who we were. But after a lot of Cuban cigars that Napolitan seemed to be able to get, along with exquisite brandy, which is about the only memory I have of a meeting we had in Paris to set this up. See, now I'm so old I forgot what I was going to say. But the point is, today the perception of a political consultant is probably much sharper, much deeper than it was then. And my word of warning to you is this. Already in my state of North Carolina, they're talking about regulations for consultants. Bad. Regulations for media people. We have to do something about, because you may have heard of this case in the congressional district where the political consultant, and he's called that all the time, rigged that election or tried to. So, you know, the perception, I think it has got to be more positive, because if it doesn't, I think you're going to end up with the state and perhaps federal regulation. End of homily.
Any other questions in the audience? We have time for a couple more.
You have a question?
This is in relation to everything everyone said, particularly Walt. I think one of the problems we have, or had, I think it's getting better, is that we became more important than the candidates. We worked to get on television, and I'm part of that group, I admit. We had television programs. We had one consultant who's on the Today Show once a week. But I've had people, reporters, go around the candidate and come to me to ask a question. Well, I don't think it's as bad now as it once was. But we're all vying for attention because attention meant business. And we should be invisible, or more invisible. We should be behind the scenes, not in front of the camera. And it took me a while to learn that, but finally, in a presidential campaign, I learned that the person run for president should be the ultimate speaker and not the person producing his television or his strategy.
Can I make a quick comment? When I was asked to be on the AAPC board, I didn't know any Republicans. I'm just being honest with you. I'd never seen one. I came from the great state of Louisiana, and Raymond will attest that if there were two, I didn't know them, and you could have put them all into a phone booth. I didn't know them, but I was asked to come onto the board, and the very first AAPC board meeting that I went to, when we walked out, I was a little bit aghast. I mean, the Ds were on one side, the Rs were on the other, and I was the only woman in the room. And when we walked out, Joe Sorrell turned to me and he said, out of deference for you, there wasn't a food fight. And I was like, oh my God. But I would encourage each of you to get involved in this organization because it's a fabulous organization. And what I learned from being on the board and moving up through and being president and past president was that it does teach you exactly what Tony said. I mean, my best friends are here and I can't tell you which is R and which is D. And it came from the cohesiveness of having to run the organization itself. And it actually gave me a different perspective on Republicans that I would have never had. So I do encourage you to get involved because it's a fabulous place.
Was that a compliment? That was a compliment? What are you again? Exactly. Unless you have a question, Elena, I'd like to ask you guys, it's probably not fair, but is there one moment in your career that you're either most proud of or happened and you didn't plan it that way and it altered your trajectory and what you were doing? Is there one place that you're most proud of?
That's probably the easiest question I've ever had. Ran probably 400 campaigns in my career. And one time in 1965, an ex-B actor came to my office and said, I want to run for governor of California. Well, we viewed him as a B actor at the time. That was the most promising thing that ever happened in my career. Some of the things that Ray was talking about earlier about consultants getting out front and in the news, from that point on in my life, I grabbed onto Ronald Reagan's coattails and went. It wasn't Spencer Roberts that did it. We did something in the first 6 months, yes, introduce him to the process, keep him out of trouble, but once he learned the system, we all know what happened.
I guess the thing that probably changed my trajectory and was the thing I was proudest of is not when I was a professional political consultant, but when I was a political activist. That's how it came to the game. I was state and national president of Young Democrats, and I hail from Kentucky. But we had a Southerner running for president, Jimmy Carter, and I went to Iowa and New Hampshire with Jimmy Carter with a bunch of folks from Georgia, and slept on couches and in the front seat of a car where we could stay. I mean, all of us, I see Wally shaking his head. If you've never been through that, there's really not anything like that experience. And when we won in New Hampshire, I mean, I came back home after that, but it was incredible. And I'll also add to it, probably one of the saddest moments of our life is when President Reagan beat Carter at the end of his term of office. And my parents called me, and I happened to be born to Republican parents. And they were, I'm sure they did not vote for Jimmy Carter, okay? But they said to me that they were so sorry for how heartbroken I was. I said, well, I'm really not heartbroken. I'm just glad this is over for Jimmy Carter. Seriously, because it really was out of hand. And we need hope and promise in our country, whoever's running it. And let's find people who can do that and give that to us and support them.
Yeah, I just want to say I was privileged enough to sit with Phil Burton at a restaurant in San Francisco when he redistricted the whole state of California on the back of a napkin in a roast beef restaurant, and watched him do it. I mean, the guy had amazing memory, and I said, "Wow, this guy's my hero." And I worked on his campaign, and I said, from there on, I was hooked on politics.
I'm just listening, trying to think about an answer to that question. And one of the most, I don't know, the proudest moments, but one of the most memorable moments for me was at the CPAC conference in early 80s, 82, and I'm sure you're familiar with that, but I mean, it's like having a convention, but it's conservatives. And Ronald Reagan spoke every time he was president, and we were at the Mayflower Hotel. The Secret Service had scanned the room. People were sitting down. The presidential seal's up on the lectern. Everything is ready to go. And the White House calls us and says the president isn't coming. Because somebody had done a poll of the people there and asked them their favorite member of the cabinet, and Al Haig had come out last. And the news release was conservatives call for Haig's resignation. So here I have a room full of people and the whole thing, and the president isn't coming. And we were trying and trying and trying, and the other people that were talking to the White House and Lee Atwater and God knows who, and I said, you're wrong. The person who's going to make this decision is Nancy. Get Nancy on the phone. And we did talk to Nancy, and she said, okay. And wham, it was 15 minutes from the White House to the Mayflower, if that. And he came, had a wonderful time. Haig spoke the next day, and he was signing autographs for an hour and a half, had 400 people on their feet applauding. And I think about how close we came to this all blowing up, but just keeping your cool and knowing where the power was. That was important.
I just want to see if there's any other questions. We're nearing the end of our time. Anyone have a question out there? Raise your hand. All right, go.
Good. I would just continue with the last question because it may be something to hopefully change some of your own perspectives about what you can accomplish in the profession that you've chosen. I remember in 1987, 88, we're in the Negresco Hotel in Nice, and there's a conference going on, and it's sort of, sometimes you know how things continue out in the hallway, and in this case it was Klaus Gollenbach, who was representing the Free Democrats, and Gennady Gerasimov was there. Wally, you were there, I think, and he was foreign minister to Gorbachev, and they continued the conversation as they went into the hallway, and Gollenbach is making the case to him, and then they get on the phone to Bonn and to Moscow, and their common language was English, so I'm standing there as this conversation goes on. And right there on the phone, they make the decision to bring Gorbachev to Berlin. It brings down the Honecker administration. The wall comes down. I mean, you see one of those seminal moments that, you got a little glimpse of it. I felt a little bit like Forrest Gump, being in that moment. But for somebody who'd been raised in sort of, conservative politics, thinking that, there's a conspiracy and, everything is, the fix is in, and the eye-opening moment that the fix is not in, and things are in flux, and what you do and what you can change. You can actually change the direction things are going to go. And so the changes we saw over the next few years, over the next 20 years, were just stunning. But for me, it was a real eye-opener. The fix is not in. You can make change.
Anyone else to that question?
I don't know that there's any one moment, but there are a number of moments that make me really happy I went into this business. And it's very much the same as Wayne. We're helping people get elected who really can make a difference in people's lives. And I think about people like Lamar Alexander, whom I've worked for a quarter century, who's always been a constructive force. Marco Rubio, an incredible talent. Bob Corker, a man of real integrity. Bill Haslam, the governor of Tennessee. Every single kid who graduates from high school in Tennessee today has 2 years of advanced training, community college, technical school, four-year college, paid for by the state without a tax increase. That's made a huge difference and will continue to make a huge difference in the lives of a lot of kids in Tennessee as we go into the 21st century, where you need a lot more skills to get a job. So helping good people get elected to make a difference really has made me proud and made me feel good about this business.
Well, my life's been a highlight. I'm very proud of my life. Everything I am, everything I have, everything I own came through politics, and I hope honestly. But someone on the other end of the group here talked about a food fight. I want to talk about my first AAPC board meeting. I think Wally was there. Bob Squire, Bill Hamilton, Roger Ailes, Bob Keefe. Anyway, the official drink of the association was Rob Roy's, Glenlivet Rob Roy's. And we began our meetings, our board meetings then, with the official drink. 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. Well, about the fourth, Bob Squire and Roger Ailes began to have a fight, throwing rolls from one end of the table to the other out of the roll basket. And they were pounding each other with rolls. And then we ordered another round to kind of slow the whole thing down. And we finally got down to business. And the first business was ethics. Roger Ailes stood up and went to the door, slammed it, says, "I do not believe in ethics," and left. That was my first exposure to the board. So the board has become a lot better, but not as colorful and not as entertaining.
What Ray just said about what our profession has done for him personally, I think that's the highlight of my life also. I totally agree with Ray. It's my friends, everybody on this, sitting here, I wouldn't have had this friendship had I not been involved in campaigns. Had I not walked into Matt Reese's office and he needed somebody desperately, he would have hired anybody that walked in his door. He happened to hire me, and the rest is history. So it really is an honorable profession. It's an honorable life. And God, I've had fun. And I'm going to have a lot more fun, too. Thank you.
Well, let's have a round of applause for our AAPC pioneers. Thank you all for sharing your advice and your observations, your historical perspective, and we might have to have an official drink of the AAPC after this.
I like that idea. Second.
Rob Roy, made with Glenlivet, please.
All right, thank you all.